This isn't warm anymore. Alrighty, hello, my name is Tristen Fry. I am the writer and director from Frankenstein in College, and I'm here to discuss how we made our latest project, Frankenstein in College. I'd say the idea for Frankenstein in College came to me after I read the original book by Mary Shelley. I read it for my advanced placement literature class as a form of extra credit, and I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. I was really enticed by the duality of the creator and the creation, involving Victor Frankenstein and his monster. I loved the characterization of the monster and felt that that is quite a unique thing that I didn't expect from the book. When you compare it to the original movie from 1931, you really don't see any of that. The monster is more of a mumbling, bumbling compared to the intelligent and vengeful monster from the book. It's a complex character, sort of dwindled down to a very basic structure. It still works, and the original Frankenstein is still by far one of my favorite movies I've ever seen. But when I was thinking about my own Frankenstein project, the whole basis was around the concept of what monster would I use if I were to create my own tale of Frankenstein. And so I settled on this concept of a monster who expressed that intelligence. That was the whole idea. I wanted to mix both the original book and the classic tale of Frankenstein that we know and love today from the movie. And mixing those together is what became the big foundation of Frankenstein in College for me. When I was writing it, I tend to think a lot about where I'd go with this and that. And ultimately, what pulled me to have the college theme was knowing that because this is a high school film club, I wanted to sort of think about how I could make it fit within a tone and scale that was a bit smaller than the original movie. I couldn't film in a giant castle. I couldn't film in a village. I couldn't really do any of that. And so I immediately thought of the things which I had on hand for me to use. And that exact thing was a college campus. And so that's where the idea of Frankenstein in College really came together and sold it as Frankenstein in College. I pitched it to the executive team at the film club before the previous year ended, right after we finished production on Mission Impossible. Me and my co-president were talking a lot about projects we were looking forward to doing the next year. He went ahead and he's doing his own. Meanwhile, I thought, well, a good start for us would be a Frankenstein project. It's a classic Halloween thing, and it's something we can get going on at the start of the year. So that was where we went forward with that idea. As time grew on and I started doing pre-writes with the film, I thought more about what direct inspirations did I want. I didn't want this to be more universally applied. I wanted a style. I wanted a certain feeling to it. And that feeling I really enjoyed was from Young Frankenstein, the film by, I believe it was Mel Brooks. I love that movie. It's a pretty good comedy, and I feel it injects the comedic story into Frankenstein in a very interesting way. It sort of battles with the theme, and that's something I wanted to avoid. I still wanted to tell the story the way it was before, the way it's meant to be told, with that tale of consequences. And what really sold me and brought me to that idea of consequences was Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. I loved that movie. I saw it and I went, that is what pieced together the inspiration for Frankenstein in College. If you could tell, there's of course the scenes which are in color and black and white, another big inspiration from that movie. As a young filmmaker, I tend to look at things coming out now that I'm enjoying and seeing what they did and how I could apply that to my own work to possibly advance it myself. When I started properly writing the movie, something that I was very big on was how I'd use the comedy. In my previous film, Mission Impossible, the comedy was... it sort of felt like a joke was just thrown in whenever it could, very punny. And I wanted to see if I could make comedy mean a bit more. I wanted to interject it into these characters, into their stories, and the theme. I wanted to use the comedy to advance the theme. That's why most of the jokes made are specifically involving Vector and him not really thinking about what he's doing. And just it all started to come together when I started working on it. And as I later discovered, turns out we have the exact same plot as Frankenweenie. I did not know that. That was purely accidental. When I was working on the characters, something which really came to mind was if I'd use Igor or Harry. Both are from the original tales of, Frankenstein. But you have one, you don't have the other. When you have Igor, you tend to not have Harry. And I wanted to see what would happen if I put them both in. Where would they fit into the story? In the original Frankenstein movie, Igor is just the lab assistant. That's it. He doesn't really do a whole lot. And really, as in Young Frankenstein, where he's used more as a comedic relief character, I think it would have been fun to sort of have that a bit more loopy character who sort of provides more generic comic relief to really, really offset and sort of give relief from tension from this film. And ultimately, I dug the idea of him being an athlete with a scholarship because those people can kind of do whatever they want on campus. That's kind of their thing. And then with Harry, he was very important to Frankenstein in the way that he's a character who understands the consequences. You can see at points in the movie where Vector shows his admiration and hopes for chasing these dreams down, and then Harry sort of hesitates. He thinks a bit more on the consequences of what he's doing. And that was the big thing with a lot of the comedic parts, was the differences between them with the studying montage and the creator's monologue. Professor Waldman was a character I did like to keep. I was originally planning on having him be played by one of our teachers at a school. Yeah, I wrote him in mind to be played by him. He's more fitting into the pun humor that I normally do. But because of scheduling issues, I couldn't get him on set, so I ultimately resorted to my backup. Did also a great job, and really it sort of made me think a lot about how certain actors I pick, what they do to influence the characters themselves. That was a very big thing I noticed while filming. Because if we had our original planned actor, we would have definitely had that dad energy I was hoping for in the screenplay. But with our actor who placed him, we had Lillian, and she did a great job. But because of her personality and how just she is, and this is how normally with actors are, her own personality is injected a little bit, so Professor Waldman became a bit more of a socially awkward character, but a lovable one. I personally think Lillian brings an energy to the table that was very welcoming on set. But the biggest one was the search for the monster. When I was writing Vector, Harry, and Igor, I had the idea on who I wanted. It was the main trio. I wanted people who get along well together. That main group, that's why I have Casten, Gabe, and Brockton. Those three I've known for forever, and they have the best chemistry ever. On set, they'd have the best goofs, they'd had so much fun. But then I couldn't think of someone who would have played a good monster. I wanted this monster to be a complex character, a character who looks more lonesome, out of place, lonely. That's why I gave him little costume things like the gorilla hand and the monster bolts. And even when I was in pre-production, I was heavily considering using some sort of tracking editor thing to give his eyes a reflection when the light was shown in it. This ultimately didn't happen because I couldn't get a solid silhouette of him in frame all the time, in the way where I didn't think he was dark enough to where it justified. I feel if the light was there, it would look a bit weird. I wanted it to be when he was more blacked out, but that wasn't really used a whole lot in the movie. Plus, I didn't really figure out the editing for that too well. But ultimately, at the start of the school year, as we started working on these projects, getting them forward, we did get new members into the club. And that's where we got Toby, who played a phenomenal monster. I remember I messaged him on Discord going like, I have an idea. And he went... And ultimately, working with him was an absolute blast. He's a really fun dude. I was really happy to be able to work with him on the set. He really provided new ideas to the character, but also really acted him, and I feel it really was an advancement for my directing, my directing with this film, because I really tried to show him on set how I wanted the monster to act and how I wanted it to look, and he portrayed it really well and added his own flair, and I feel that his own take on the monster was really incredible. Production was really time consuming. The film ended up taking 2.5 weeks to film, and it took longer than expected. And this is due to, just as always, everybody has a life here. We kind of can't get everything to work perfectly, and the fact that we managed to get things to interlink and function is kind of crazy on its own. And really, it was very interesting to film this movie because a lot of it, if not all major scenes, were in fact filmed on campus grounds, where we had very specific limitations regarding what we could do. The whole people, like, you can walk out on a campus and you just film a TikTok or whatever, but we have more equipment with us, and I try and handle this in a more professional way. I try to have, the places where we're filming know that we're there, sort of have pre-approval and all that. Luckily, most of the filming, specifically like all the classroom scenes, were filmed inside areas which my specific school is housed in, so getting into those is very easy. I simply just reached out to the school security officer, who was just like, yo, yeah, I can let you guys in. This wasn't like private property where, say, for example, in this very room which I'm in right now, I could film practically whatever I wanted because this is my property. But on a campus ground where we filmed this movie, we had some third-party concerns. They weren't as big as you'd think, but we had some specific guidelines we had to follow. I mean, like, half the movie takes place in Frankenstein's laboratory, a third takes place in Professor Waldman's classroom. And really, when it came to production, I wanted to think a lot about where we'd be filming and how I could utilize those sets. Something very big was our new equipment for lighting and microphone. I have both those right here. In a way to make us look more professional. A big goal of mine involving this film was to have more professionality. I wanted more moving camera shots. I wanted less stiffness. You watch Mission Impossible, the camera doesn't really move. That was a bit difficult because that film was filmed on a Canon camera, which wasn't my own, and so I had some limitations regarding it, and not to mention unfamiliarity. I had no clue how to use that. Meanwhile, Frankenstein in College was filmed on my iPhone right here. And ultimately, iPhone filmmaking was a very interesting thing. We run into problems to where an iPhone captures less color compared to a Canon camera. And so ultimately, the film didn't look as colorful as I would have hoped. And of course, low light conditions didn't work too well, so filming night scenes wasn't exactly easy. It was a very good opportunity working with all of this equipment, advancing this hobby and skill. Something which I found a little difficult when working on this project was how time-consuming it ended up being. When we filmed Mission Impossible, I remember we could get a whole scene done in 15, 20, 30 minutes. It depends on how big and aesthetic it was. But these scenes in Frankenstein were meant to not even be that big. In fact, the film was supposed to end up being shorter than what it ended up being, which was 26 minutes. About as long as Mission Impossible. And funny enough, Mission Impossible had a screenplay of 60 pages. Frankenstein in College had 31. 31, scratch that. 31. So there was some interesting levels with that. But yeah, getting moving camera shots was by far a very impressive feat. A very big compliment which I did get involving this film was how well shot it was. How good it looked, the lighting was. I tried to have better control over the lighting and think about what it would have portrayed. I mean, I have the lighting rig, I have lighting back here. You see in the background here, I tried to have that color contrast. And experimenting with the black and white footage, I did a few screen tests with that and tried to figure out the best ways on how to manage that. On set, of course, there were a lot of external forces that did affect its usage a little, but ultimately it was a very big learning experience to where I really got to figure out how that works. And I mean, there are some shots which I'm very proud of because of our new lighting rig means I could have helped a lot with focus and shading and value and depth. So the film does look way more professional than previous ones. I compare that to shots from Mission Impossible and other things I've done in my past before the film club, and it looks far better in return. Far better, I'd say. Overall, I'd say production never goes easy. It's very difficult. You got a lot of time restrictions, and specifically because all of us are in high school, we kind of run into problems where something comes up last minute, and so it's really goofy. Like 15 minutes before casting, the rest of the cast is supposed to arrive on set. I'm sitting there in the room getting set up, and then I get a text like, I have a work meeting right now, which, that's very good to tell your director your work schedule. He asks for it. You say you're fine. Now I don't believe you. Working with people is an interesting thing. And back to the whole Toby thing. When I invited Toby onto it, he was more of a person I kind of knew, a friend of friend who recently joined the club. And it really advanced my working with people thing, because on my previous projects I just had my friends with me, but now I had a completely new person who I didn't know all too well, and throughout the production we managed to get to know each other very well. I consider Toby a good friend now. I love the dude, he's awesome. The editing process on this movie was very interesting. I made multiple versions of some scenes where I have altercations and music or audio or something, and just little things. I noticed the editing for this film took longer than expected as well, and I think that's partially because my computer can't render iMovie files for some weird reason really well. So when I'm sitting there editing, I'm like on time rendering it to get a rough draft view, and it doesn't really give me an accurate representation. So that ran into some issues. Funnest part, though, of editing was the fact that so the movie premiered October 27th after school. So on Fridays we have short days. It was shown at 1 p.m. October 27th. I was still editing the movie that morning, and it was downright insane. So I had been editing while on the breaks of production, while I was sitting and waiting around for the next day of filming. And so it was very slow, though. I was not complete with the movie. I'd say I was about 2/3 done. And then so October 26th, the day prior, I got home from work at about 9:30. I sort of sat around for 15 minutes, went, you know what? I'm going to edit this movie until it is done. I did it for 2.5 hours, then I let my laptop recharge because it has a bit of a battery. I'd give about a 30-minute break. Then I'd go back to editing. I finished editing the movie. I clicked render at 9:30 a.m. on Friday, October 27th. Yes. No sleep. I got no sleep that day. I was editing all night, and that was really funny. Despite no sleep, I was very excited for the project because then we held its red carpet. Lots of great people who came to the red carpet, and then of course following Monday, the movie was shown again at school during lunch. Great times. Overall, I'd say a lesson statement involving this project is that I'm proud of myself with this one. Very proud of myself. In terms of my writing and directing, I feel I really upped the kicker. I really pushed myself forward and out there into something I'm not too familiar with. I've made projects before, but not really like this. I've never made something that tries to do something. My previous movies I did before the film club were more so joke movies. The Beans movie, Duel of the Mates. They were kind of just, ha-ha, funny. But then there was Mission Impossible, where I tried to write in a theme, and ultimately throughout production, I didn't care a whole lot for it. We just, I would be on set, and someone goes, oh, we don't have time to do this, or can't do this. Fun fact, a lot of scenes were scrapped while filming Mission Impossible, because we ran into timing constraints, specifically with Kasten involving his Richard Bad Guy scenes, which is why he's hardly in the movie. But then with Frankenstein, I wanted to say something. I wanted to give a message. Tell a story, a real one. And that dedication to that, where I actually on set had to deal with some cast members going I don't know the importance of this scene or the importance of this specific line of dialogue. And some of this I get, it's because some people are a bit stubborn, and I'm a bit stubborn too. But then I'd explain to them the importance of this one scene or this line of dialogue, what this thing means for the whole project. He did that with Mission Impossible, which was it's just a scene where Agent Josh talks to Fred B. Isles and moves on. So you remove it, it's kind of weird. You kind of lose a chunk of the story, but nothing special in it. But then say, for example, if I cut the creator's monologue is something that I had a discussion about cutting. The creator's monologue, when Vector leans over the monster, has his hands on him, and gives his speech, his glorious speech, which was inspired by Young Frankenstein. I justify things because there's something I'm trying to accomplish. And that dedication, trying to deliver something, is what I feel what made this better. Far better than anything I've done before. Had a complex character, an attempt to. And of course I had some more interesting characters, better dynamics, overall better sets, better scenarios. A very good jump forward for my talent and this club's talent, because now I'm going to be going ahead and teaching this stuff in the club as we continue with our next project, where I'll have our newer people be more involved on set and in the crew. And really, that's Frankenstein in college was a beautiful learning experience for me in every way, from writing and directing, shooting, acting, everything. Tried to work on a lot of different things all at once, and I'm very proud of how it turned out. Holy cow, going for 28 minutes. I wonder how much of this I'm going to have to cut out. I didn't necessarily, like, script this. I just kind of went, I got it. Because, like, I'd sit down, like, what's the difference between scripting it and just doing it? Because I wasn't just going to read off a script, because I feel like I'm not pulling my ideas out. I wanted to sit down and go, like, this is how I thought it would. And so that does mean I'm not exactly pulling all my ideas out, because I'm not collecting them over time. I'm sort of like, here's my ideas. But it works. I mean, after all, I just sort of talked about how I made my movie. And this is so cold, it's not good anymore.